after the Buddha sat and meditated and had realizations and came to know the Four Noble Truths, he compassionately decided to teach so that some of us would be able to understand and to gain a release from suffering. And here we are in 2024. But did the teachings and the conditions for those teachings spread by themselves or solely because of the Buddha? Hi, it's Margaret Maloney, and welcome to the Death Dhamma podcast. I'm a Buddhist practitioner out here in the world, having experienced the loss of my loved ones and knowing how much my Buddhist practice helped me on my grief journey. And now, together, we have this safe space to discuss death, dying, grief, and the Buddhist teachings that help us really understand attachment, impermanence, being compassionate, being death ready, what it means to live a life so that we can have a peaceful death. Yep, it's a big topic, and we're going to take it on together. Let's go. Like other leaders, the Buddha had a team. He had a network. His teachings are with us today due to the interplay between many causes and conditions. There were individuals who saw him, heard him, and learned from him and thought, that is really useful. I want others to have access to these teachings. One of those individuals was Anathapindika, a merchant who contributed greatly to the spread of Buddhism. At the time of the Buddha, India was becoming more mercantile and less agricultural. And this meant that a new class, the merchant class, was growing. Now, in order to participate in trade, merchants had to break free of the prevailing Brahmin beliefs, specifically around caste interactions and purity. And the reason for that is that Brahmins weren't really, from their religious beliefs, allowed to participate in trade. And so merchants existed and grew, and they began to reject the notion that paying for expensive rituals was an essential part of their salvation. That, too, was a part of the Brahmin belief system. It was based often on rituals. Some of those rituals involved a lot of animal sacrifice. And the Buddha did not teach that. And the merchants started following the Buddha because what the Buddha taught was an easier fit with their ability to trade and participate in trade and sell things. Now I'm saying the Buddha, and I'm going to say Buddhism, but of course at that time he wasn't called the Buddha necessarily, and it wasn't called Buddhism, right? He was somebody wandering around and teaching. But at any rate, Buddhism was a more natural fit for the merchants. And, Buddhism offered prosperity to those who were willing to work for it, as opposed to you were set up a certain way because of the caste that you were born into. So it was during this time of change that Anathapindika, a wealthy merchant, banker, conducted business trips between Savatthi and Rajagaha. And these are two important points in Buddhism. And the Buddha and his monks often traveled between these locations. Now, Anathapindika encountered the Buddha in Rajagaha and became a follower. And when he returned home, he instructed his friends and associates and acquaintances to prepare the road to Savatthi. Savatthi was Anathapindika's home base, with dwellings, parks, and rest houses. Through his direction, the route between these two trade centers became even more desirable. So he was encouraging and making it easier and more comfortable for the Buddha and his entourage to travel. And remember, they were wandering ascetics. That's what they did. The Buddha taught primarily to monks, but also to lay people. But if you look at the Pali Canon, there's more instances of the discussion of, the Buddha said to his monks, and fewer instances where the Buddha taught lay people. But some analysis of who were the lay people who received the Buddha's teachings and who received the most. First, there's a king called King Pasenadi, who also helped promote the spread and growth of Buddhism. So he was the first recipient, received the most teachings from the Buddha. And then second is Anathapindika. Anathapindika was a fan of Sariputta and Ananda. Now, Sariputta and Ananda were two of the Buddha's chief monks. Ananda was actually the Buddha's cousin and his attendant. Anathapindika was visited by both Sariputta and Ananda while Anathapindika was on his deathbed. So in turn, they also respected him. And Sariputta observes, he sees that Anathapindika is dying, and he teaches him to stop clinging to what is seen, heard, cognized, encountered, sought after, and examined by the mind. And he encourages him to stop clinging to this world. Anathapindika is overcome with the depth of this teaching. And Sariputta proceeds to tell him that this teaching is typically reserved for those who have gone forth. Those having gone forth being monks and later nuns, and not given to lay people. So Sariputta gives Anathapindika a special teaching. Anathapindika declares that there are lay people who are worthy of this type of teaching. But again, the fact that Sariputta provides this instruction to him indicates that he was held in very high regard. And Sariputta's regard for Anathapindika as an advanced practitioner is evident in Samyutta Nikaya passages 55, 26 and 55.27, which is called the Sotipata Samyutta Suttam. And he describes Anathapindika as without the distrust of the Buddha or the Dhamma or the Sangha. Sariputta also states that Anathapindika is not immoral, does not possess the wrong view, nor does he act out of the wrong intention. He goes on to note that he lives according to the Noble Eightfold Path. He concludes that when one has faith in the Blessed One, unshakable and well-established, and good conduct built on virtue, dear to the noble ones and praised, when one has confidence in the Sangha and view that has been rectified, they say that one is not poor. That one's life is not in vain. Therefore, the person of intelligence, remembering the Buddha's teachings, should be devoted to faith and virtue, to confidence and vision of the Dhamma. And again, he is referring to Anathapindika as such a person. Anathapindika has also been called the Buddha's chief patron or the Great Benefactor. And he was the reason that the Buddha and his monks were able to spend about 25 rains retreats in Savatthi at Jeta Grove. And if you hear passages or read passages from the Pali Canon, you'll recognize Jeta Grove, because you'll recognize the pattern of, at one time, the Blessed One was staying in Savatthi, or the Blessed One was at Jeta's Grove, and he said to his monks, and then the teaching begins, right? And so that's where the monastery at Jeta's Grove came to exist, and it was through the generosity of Anathapindika. And when the Buddha and his monks were present on retreat, Anathapindika provided them food and clothing for all of them. So, part of the story of Anathapindika is about this wealthy merchant banker who risks poverty to support the Sangha, because he absolutely will give away his last mango to take care of this group and to support them. But it's not only his generosity that places him on the list as crucial to early Buddhism, and, also the spread of compassion and our release from suffering. It's what his generosity created. This is his contribution. His gift led to the creation of a lasting body of knowledge. There are over 200 occurrences in the Pali Canon, at least, because this comes from, I've shared with you in the past some research I did on the teachings around compassion. So in the table where I gathered up teachings on compassion, there are 200 occurrences where those teachings were given at Savatthi, Anathapindika's home base. Many of these passages are discussed in previous sections, But they include teachings on the inheritance of the Dhamma, like Majjhima Nikaya 3.1.3, qualities a woman should possess so that with the breakup of the body after death, she is reborn in companionship with the agreeable bodied deities. Anguttara Nikaya 8.47 is that passage. How to live in solitude, Majjhima Nikaya 4.1.4. Teaching and effacement, Majjhima Nikaya 8.1.8. The greater exhortation to Rahula. Rahula was the Buddha's son. Majjhima Nikaya 62.1. The person who is fettered internally and externally, and Anguttara Nikaya 2.33. Where to find true and lasting happiness, Majjhima Nikaya 26.1. And the unconditioned and the path leading to the unconditioned, which is Samyutta Nikaya 43.12. There are teachings not captured, because again, I'm talking to you from a subset of data I collected for other purposes. So there are other teachings that occurred and were delivered at Savatthi. One of the things about Anathapindika was he was also humble. And so he was hesitant to ask questions of the Buddha or his disciples. This has been attributed to the fact that he didn't want to be accused of trading his donations for personal advice or special attention. He was often in the audience when the Buddha spoke, but he just wanted to see what the Buddha would teach. Sometimes he would discuss his own life experiences to hear if the Buddha would incorporate these experiences into the teachings. Direct teachings from the Buddha to Anathapindika himself appear in about 19 suttas, and from Buddha's disciples, probably 3. His legacy, Anathapindika's legacy, is the comprehensive code of conduct for the conscientious layperson. That's probably most of us here today. That's probably those of you who are listening. I'm trying. That's me trying, right? When the Buddha gave him instructions, much of it was later recorded in the Pali Canon. So in this way, he was not just the benefactor to the Buddha and his monks, he was the benefactor for those to come, those like you and I. The lessons taught to Anathapindika include the 4 things a disciple is to provide to monks. That's Anguttara Nikaya 4.60. The 4 types of bliss that are available to a householder. Anguttara 4.62. The 5 desirable, pleasant, and agreeable things that a householder may experience if he or she follows the correct path. That sounds good, right? Also Anguttara 5.43. Sorry, guys, my pronunciation is a little off there. 5 ways in which a noble disciple also acquires wealth. Anguttara Nikaya 5.41. The difference between right and wrong conduct for a layperson. Anguttara Nikaya 10.91. And the 4 mental abidings that bring happiness in the present and purify the mind. And also how to attain stream entry. There's a lot there. So when you think, what can I do to help alleviate the sufferings of others? I'm just in the world working, earning money, supporting myself, and possibly a family. There's a place for all of us. And with your role, we might not say merchant today, although sometimes we still talk about merchants, right? But in your role as a lay person out in the world with, what you do, the career you have the ability to make contributions that matter, that could be lasting. And when those contributions are lasting and helping the Buddhist teaching survive, then you too are becoming a person who's helping with the release from suffering. I've got books for you, starting with Carpooling with Death, How Living with Death Will Make You Stronger, Wiser, and Fearless, the book that got me going and helped me to discuss going through the death of my loved ones, followed by Sitting with Death, Buddhist insights to help you face your fears and live a peaceful life, based on Season 1 of the Death Dhamma podcast, and just recently, Enlightenment Unleashed, how your pet can lead you to spiritual transformation, because during our lifetime, we may see the rising and ceasing of many pets, and we love them like they are our family. Find these on Amazon.com or come see me at MargaretMaloney.com.
You've been listening to the Death Dhamma podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on MargaretMaloney.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.